everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the presidential election show. It's great to see you all again. Don't forget at the end of the show to please subscribe and ring that notification bell. It's great to have back on the show, of course, our in-house expert at LP Brussels, Ryan Hunter. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
And we're very much look forward to hearing from you about this week's developments in relation to the campaign. And perhaps if we can start with the issue that is dominating the campaign, or at least it appears to be dominating the campaign, and namely law and order. And we've seen a real exchange of verbal blows this week between the two sides. Do you want to walk us through that, Ryan, to see whether or not it really is becoming the issue of the campaign? I know there's some controversy on the Democrat side that are they now moving on to Trump's agenda by responding? And most of their ads at the moment and their investment on advertising and social media has been on COVID-19 and the recovery. Now they're switching to attacks on law and order. And one example is the $45 million campaign they've launched this week, just this week, out of a massive war chest they raised in August of over $300 million. These are, compared to European campaigns, these are extraordinarily high figures. So will that make a difference, Ryan? Or do you feel maybe, Biden's almost reinforcing the theme that this is a law and order election?
Well, that's a very good question. And in this rule of law debate, we have our first post-COVID campaign issue. You're right in saying that COVID and the handling of the crisis has been the main campaign point for months, until you had some protests after the death of George Floyd, and now following the shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, rule of law is very firmly on the agenda. Now, Trump would love this to be a campaign issue, would love to put this, these protests front and center to show that, this is what would happen in a Joe Biden America. Now, the Democrats are quite, you would say rightly, pointing out that the protests are currently happening in a Donald Trump America. So both sides are trying to pin the blame on the other for the current protests. Now, I think the recent polling may not make the Republicans so happy from Wisconsin, and that Fox News has Biden gaining following the protests. So rule of law has become a battleground issue, not in the way that Trump was hoping for, however.
Yeah, and maybe particularly referring to the new attack ads from the Biden camp, "We are not afraid." He's actually quoting there the Pope John II, "Be not afraid." I mean, going along very much the emotional track that you thought his campaign was inevitably going to do in order to counter Trump, unlike the failed Hillary Clinton campaign 4 years ago. Do you think we're going to hear more about this? Although I did notice, interestingly, that Trump also added another front to his attacks on Biden this week in Pennsylvania, another key state where he starting to talk about jobs being at risk if you vote for Biden. I think he said, Biden's plan is to appease the domestic terrorists, and my plan is to arrest and prosecute them. And he went on to say this election is about safety and this election is about jobs. So perhaps Trump is now opening up another front of attack on the Democrats.
And it seems like any front of attack beyond the rule of law one should be explored by the Republicans, because they've just not struck a chord with the rule of law one. And Pennsylvania is, of course, a very interesting state that Trump won against Hillary, and it's very much in play for this election as well. Whether that will also prove to be a decisive argument remains to be seen. But, Trump's also trying to get across the point that Biden's being controlled by the radical Democratic Party, or that Biden's wish to close down the country if he became president, if the COVID crisis was still going, that would also cost the economy and cost jobs. So he's launching a few different lines of attack, throwing a lot on the wall to see what will stick, if anything, just to try and shake the race up a bit.
Yeah. And looking ahead to next week, Ryan, I mean, what do you foresee in the next week or two, the main battleground issues, the campaign events? I know this week, the past week, they've announced the dates and the moderators for the presidential debates too. So are we like to see a busy week, or is it more consolidating the positions they both took at their conventions?
Well, that's a good question. The post-convention landscape is quite strange in the sense that no side can really claim to have had a boost from their convention. So normally we'd be sitting here talking about, okay, this argument made sense in the convention. Let's take it to the country. But we're having trouble trying to discern what arguments, if any, from the convention made its way through to the American people. So I think what we're seeing instead is the Democrats and the Republicans trying to find out what states do they have to go to make their case. And we saw Trump in Pennsylvania. We've seen Joe Biden in Wisconsin, which is quite an important one. That was a massive critique of Hillary Clinton, who did not go to Wisconsin during the campaign in 2016. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of that, of the campaigns going almost state by state to bring their case and to raise very specific issues.
And in fact, if I can now turn to that point, Ryan, if I may, namely those key battleground states. And again, I think from a European perspective, we focus a lot on that national polling, and in particular the reasonably comfortable lead, it would appear, that Biden has nationally. But I know you've done some analysis of the figures. I know your view is it's a lot closer, the race, than perhaps the national opinion polls suggest. And based on the ABC analysis, you produced this graphic, which we're going to put up now. Do you want to walk us through that, Ryan, and explain why the 5 states that you've identified here, why are they so keen, and why you think it's so close?
Yeah, well, first, it's important to note that most people will have seen the national polling. And if you've seen just the national polling, you've probably seen Joe Biden up by somewhere between 8 to 10 points on average, which is a very healthy lead. But the national polling is useful, but also very deceiving because, a candidate can be racking up more support in states that are already going to vote for him or her. So the 5 states that I've chosen based on the polling and just the trends are, you see Arizona, you see Michigan, you see Wisconsin, you see Pennsylvania, and you see Florida. Now, no one should think that this election is going to be an election fought in every state. Campaigns don't work like that. Campaigns focus very much on key states, your so-called battleground states. And I think that these 5 states will be where the election is ultimately won or lost. So I think people should watch these 5 states very carefully to try and glean any trends on who will win between the 2 candidates.
Yep. And for example, last time Pennsylvania was won by Trump in 2016 by fewer than 45,000 votes out of over 6 million. Extraordinarily close. He's obviously investing a lot of time in that state. I think he's been there twice in the past week. What's going on there? I mean, is it too close to call? The polling again suggests that Biden's got a lead, but I think there was a poll out this week, Ryan, that perhaps shows the Biden's lead is actually narrowing following the Republican convention. What's going on in states like Pennsylvania?
Well, Pennsylvania is very much a toss-up state. On a side note, it's where Joe Biden's from. Of course, he was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he always refers to Scranton whenever he can in his speeches. What's happening is the Biden campaign had a very healthy lead, double-digit lead in Pennsylvania, which recent polls show that within the margin of error. Now, he still has a lead, of course, of 4 points, and I don't think people really expect Trump to win the state again, in the sense that it was very much a shock that he won the state. Of course, he was a very consistent Democratic state. The last time a Republican won, I believe, was Bush 41 in '88. So you can see how much of a shock that was, that Pennsylvania went to the Republican Party in 2016. So I think it's not good news for the Biden campaign at all. I think Trump's visits there have helped. Now let's see if the Biden campaign sees any reason for them to go there to make their case.
Yep. And you're going to take us through these states in the weeks ahead. And are you expecting the 5 states you're focusing on to change, or has the change already happened really because of the demographics? For example, I think Arizona now is looking pretty good for Biden. So, are these states pretty fixed in terms of what the battleground is, or are we likely to see it changing?
Well, I think before the election, you could have probably guessed more or less what the battleground states were. A lot of that is based on what happened in 2018, as well as you said, demographic changes. And Arizona is a really interesting case as well. As you said, it's leaning towards Biden. It's a state that's only voted once in the general election for a Democratic Party since 1948. So it's very much in its history been a Republican state. So it's big news that it's now leaning Biden, but also unsurprising because of the demographic changes. You have a big collection of young Latino American voters who will lean more towards the Democratic Party than previous voters in other elections from the state. And there's also a Senate race that's ongoing there, where the Democrats are very confident they're going to take a seat from the Republicans, which also plays into the dynamics from the state.
Yeah. And we won't explore this issue in detail, but I'm sure it's going to again be a theme that will run through these episodes in the weeks to come, and namely the story in the media, and I think Trump himself has referred to it, that if he loses, The Economist is making the point this week, there could be real trouble in America. It could get very messy indeed, particularly if it's close, and I think you're suggesting it could well be close, that Trump simply won't accept the result. Without going too much into the detail of all that, Ryan, is that constitutionally a possibility that the president could just refuse to accept the validity of a close election that results in his defeat?
Well, the part of the recent dynamics, you've seen Trump questioning mail-in voting, which some analysts have said are his way of undermining the results preemptively. Now, with the COVID crisis and the massive increase in mail-in voting, what's going to happen most likely is we're not going to have a winner on election night. What may end up very well happening is one candidate may have a lead following election night that then gets reversed by mail-in voting coming in. So that's a very real possibility, as you say, that Trump may not accept the result. Now, in the Constitution, if Trump refuses to leave office, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, would become president on January 20th. So there are measures in place to prevent that. But I think it's perhaps too soon to speculate.
Indeed, and just for clarification, I think we're all expecting, I think the election's obviously the 3rd of November, that we would maybe wait up through the night and get a result on the 4th of November. I think what you're saying is that the mail-in ballots may take a bit of time to come in and then be counted, of course, and the results are verified. It could be some days anyway, however close it is, before we get a result this time.
Absolutely. And I think if you're looking for a case study on what may happen, you just have to look at Florida from recent elections and bit of a mess they've had with absentee ballots, which will take as much time to count as the mail-in voting. So I don't think we can really expect a definitive result on election night or even in the few days just after. I think this may take a few days. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Ryan, for that. Again, as always on the show, we don't allow our guests to leave without giving us their latest prediction, hunch, gut feeling, call it what you will. How are you feeling this week, Ryan? Who do you think is going to win?
Well, I think we have pretty much a growing consensus that Joe Biden will win the popular vote. Now, that's not a very shocking prediction because Hillary Clinton won that by 3 million votes. And I think the polls are showing quite clearly Biden enjoys a very healthy lead nationally. I think we're going to see some more trends changing in the states up until Election Day. Now, we often ignore that from outside the U.S., how much there's happening at a Senate level, at a House level on these individual races in the states. And these play a big part in influencing people to vote for a party, never mind for a person. And it's unlikely people vote for different parties for different races. So we should look very carefully at states that have competitive Senate races like North Carolina, like Arizona, for example, and see how that's playing an effect on where the state goes for Biden or Trump. In terms of a prediction, again, it's as I've said, the Electoral College is so close, and the states that need to determine how that goes are so close. You know, Florida, Pennsylvania, impossible to call right now. So we need to see if polling in the next few weeks can help clarify that.
Okay, well, as always, Ryan, thanks for joining the show this week. I hope you got a date in your diary to join us next week if you can, in another, I'm sure, exciting week of US election campaigning. Thanks to all our viewers for tuning in. Don't forget to like and share and comment whether you agree or disagree with our analysis. And as I mentioned at the beginning, don't forget also to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Once again, thank everyone for joining us. Look forward to talking to you all next week. Thank you.